I can still hear the sound of polite applause echoing through the school auditorium. The way it bounced off those cheap wooden panels, mixing with my parents' whispered praise for my sister. Perfect Megan. Always exceptional Megan. Their golden child, accepting yet another award, while I sat 3 rows behind them, invisible. My name is Amelia, and I learned about love through its absence. I was 13 when I realized I'd never be enough. Not in that house, not for those parents. The revelation didn't come as some dramatic explosion. It crept in slowly, like a shadow stretching across a room as the sun sets. "Look at her posture," my mother whispered to my father. "We did that. All those etiquette classes paid off." I watched them lean into each other, sharing their private moment of triumph, while Megan stood on stage, accepting her Young Entrepreneur of the Year award. My science fair certificate from last week was still crumpled in my backpack, unsigned. "She'll be running her own company before she's 30, my father replied, his voice thick with pride, just like I always knew she would. The audience clapped again as Megan finished her speech. Something about determination and family support. I'd stopped listening. Instead, I studied my parents' faces, searching for any trace of that same pride when they looked at me. There was nothing. Daniel, my best friend, nudged me with his elbow. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded, but my fingers were already tearing tiny strips from the program in my lap. "They didn't even turn around once," I said, "not once." "They're idiots," he replied, but we both knew it wasn't that simple. After the ceremony, we gathered in the lobby. My grandmother Eleanor caught my eye across the room, her face softening with understanding. She started walking toward me, but Megan's voice cut through the crowd. "Mom, Dad, Victoria wants to discuss investment opportunities for my project," Megan called out, waving over her new business partner. My parents gravitated toward her immediately, like moths to a flame. I stood there, clutching my backpack strap, waiting for them to remember I existed. Grandmother reached me first, her hand gentle on my shoulder. "I saw your science project last week," she said quietly. "The solar-powered water filtration system was brilliant." "Thanks, Grandma." My voice cracked slightly. "But it doesn't matter. Nothing I do ever matters." She squeezed my shoulder harder. "It matters to me and to your grandfather." That's when I heard my mother's laugh, that special laugh she reserved for Megan's achievements. "2 patents pending already. Can you believe it, Victoria? And she's only in high school." Something shifted inside me then, like a gear clicking into place, or maybe something breaking. I watched my sister bask in their attention, watched my parents orbit around her like she was their son, and I made a decision. "I have to go," I told my grandmother. "I forgot something in my locker." But I didn't go to my locker. Instead, I walked to the school library, sat down at a computer, and started researching business schools, investment strategies, corporate law, everything my sister was supposedly mastering. My grandfather found me there an hour later, surrounded by printouts and notes. "Planning something?" he asked, settling into the chair beside me. I looked up at him, and for the first time that day, I smiled. "Just preparing for my future, Grandpa. Someone once told me that the best revenge is success." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Just remember, sweetheart, revenge is a path that changes the traveler." "Good," I replied, turning back to my research, "because I'm tired of being invisible." As we left the library, I could still hear the celebrations continuing in the distance. Let them celebrate. Let them think everything was fine. I had 13 years of invisibility to transform into ammunition, and I was just getting started. Grandmother Eleanor's kitchen always smelled like rebellion. Today it was chocolate chip cookies, her silent protest against my mother's strict no processed sugar rule for the family. I sat at her counter, watching her deliberately portion out twice the chocolate chips the recipe called for. "Your mother called again," she said, sliding the first batch into the oven. "Apparently, Megan's giving a guest lecture at Harvard Business School next month. They're all flying out to support her." I focused on arranging cookie dough on the baking sheet, pressing each ball down with mechanical precision. Let me guess, they forgot to mention it to me. They assumed you'd be too busy with your little job at the library. The way she said it made it clear exactly what she thought of their assumption. The front door opened, and Grandfather George's voice carried through the house. "Eleanor, is that cookies I smell? And is that our favorite granddaughter I see?" "I'm your only granddaughter who visits," I called back, but the familiar ache was there. Megan hadn't stepped foot in their house since she'd declared their lifestyle embarrassingly middle class at last year's Thanksgiving. Grandfather settled at the counter, spreading out his newspaper. "Interesting article about Heritage Capital today. Seems they're looking for fresh talent in their analytics department." I looked up sharply. Heritage Capital, the firm where my father had tried and failed to secure a position for Megan last year. The same firm that had politely declined her application, citing lack of practical experience. "Really?" I kept my voice casual, but my hands had stopped working the dough. "Highly competitive position," he continued, sliding the newspaper toward me. "But they're specifically looking for someone with a background in both finance and environmental science. Fascinating combination. Just like my double major. The one my parents had called unfocused and impractical." My phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. "Your sister's latest Instagram post, you need to see this." I pulled it up and felt my stomach twist. There was Megan, posed in front of Heritage Capital's headquarters, caption reading, "Big news coming soon. Sometimes the best opportunities come to those who wait. # corporate success, # family legacy." "She's trying to get in through Victoria's connections," I said, showing my grandparents the post, after they already rejected her. Grandmother's spatula clattered against the counter. "That girl wouldn't know honest work if it bit her on her designer handbag." "Eleanor," Grandfather warned, but there was a glint in his eye. Though I do wonder how she'd handle actual competition. I stared at the application requirements in the newspaper. Everything aligned perfectly with my qualifications, the ones I'd built while my parents were focused on Megan's carefully curated resume. "I could apply," I said slowly. "They're accepting applications for the next 2 weeks." "You could," Grandmother agreed, pulling out the perfectly browned cookies. "And wouldn't that be interesting?" My phone buzzed again. This time, a family group text from my mother. "Dinner tomorrow night to celebrate Megan's exciting news. Attendance mandatory." Grandfather reached over and squeezed my hand. "Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else's chances," he said quietly. "It's about finally taking your own." I looked at my grandmother, who was now aggressively mixing another batch of cookie dough. At my grandfather, who had accidentally left the Heritage Capital article where I would see it. At my phone, still buzzing with my mother's demands, and Megan's carefully filtered success. "I need to go home and update my resume," I said, standing up, "and maybe buy a new suit." "Take some cookies," Grandmother insisted, packing up a dozen. "Brain food for planning your future." As I drove home, I thought about all the times I'd watched Megan take what she wanted. All the times my parents had paved her way while I carved my own path in silence. The Heritage Capital application felt like more than just a job opportunity. It was a chance to step out of the shadows on my own terms. My phone buzzed one more time. "Daniel, want help with that application? I've got wine in a wicked way with cover letters." I smiled, turning toward his apartment instead of mine. Sometimes the best foundation for revenge isn't built on hatred, but on chocolate chip cookies and true friendship. And maybe, just maybe, on finally being ready to show your family exactly who you've become while they weren't watching. The family dinner invitation was a trap. I knew it the moment I walked into Rossini's, our parents' favorite restaurant for public performances of perfect family unity. The maitre d' led me past tables of watching eyes to our usual corner booth, where Megan sat like a queen holding court, Victoria Hayes at her side. My mother's smile was razor-sharp. "Darling, you're late. We were just discussing Megan's new position at Heritage Capital." The words hit like ice water. I gripped the back of my chair, knuckles white. "New position?" "Victoria made it happen," Megan beamed, reaching for her business partner's hand. "Sometimes it's all about who you know, right?" I sat down slowly, watching Victoria's face. There was something off about her expression, a flicker of discomfort when Megan touched her hand. "Fascinating," I said, unfolding my napkin, especially since I just interviewed there yesterday. The silence that followed was exquisite. "You, what?" My father's voice had that dangerous edge I remembered from childhood disappointments. "Oh, didn't Megan mention it? We must have passed each other in the lobby." I smiled at Victoria. The analytics department was very interested in my environmental science background. Victoria shifted in her seat. "I wasn't aware you had applied, Amelia. That's actually not important right now," my mother interrupted. "We're here to celebrate Megan's success. Michael, dear, didn't you want to share the other news?" My father cleared his throat, reaching for his wallet. "Yes, well, your mother and I have decided to help Megan with a down payment on a condo near the office. It's a significant investment in her future." The waiter appeared with wine, and I watched my mother's hands shake slightly as she reached for her glass. That's when I noticed it. She wasn't wearing her anniversary diamond, the one she'd never taken off in 25 years. "How significant?" I asked quietly. "That's hardly appropriate dinner conversation," my father snapped. But I was watching Victoria, who was suddenly very interested in her menu. She knew something that made her uncomfortable enough to avoid meeting anyone's eyes. "Actually," I continued, "I've been meaning to ask about the trust fund Grandpa George set up for both of us. The one that matures next month?" Megan's fork clattered against her plate. "What trust fund?" My mother's wineglass froze halfway to her lips. My father's face went pale. "You didn't tell her?" I asked, feigning surprise. "About Grandpa's equal inheritance provision, the matching funds for both granddaughters." "Amelia," my father warned, but the damage was done. "What provision?" Megan demanded, turning to our parents. "What is she talking about?" Victoria suddenly stood up. "I should go, but Amelia, check your email tonight, about the position." She hurried away from the table, leaving behind her half-full wineglass and a thick envelope I hadn't noticed before. An envelope with Heritage Capital's logo. "Sit down, Megan," our mother hissed, as my sister started to rise. "This isn't the place." "Then where is the place?" I asked. "Where should we discuss how you've been funding Megan's perfect life? The maxed-out credit cards, the second mortgage." "How dare you?" my father started, but I cut him off. "The missing anniversary ring, Mom. How much did that pawn for?" Megan's face had gone from angry to confused to something else, something that looked almost like fear. "Victoria said the position was guaranteed," she whispered. "She said the funding was secure." "Nothing's guaranteed," I replied, standing up. "But don't worry, I'm sure our parents will figure out something. They always do, for you." I walked away from their hissed arguments, their desperate attempts to maintain control. In the restaurant's lobby, I found Victoria waiting. "The analytics position," she said quietly. "You got it. Your interview yesterday was exceptional. I wanted you to know before." She glanced back toward our table. "Before things get complicated." I nodded, understanding what she wasn't saying. "How bad are their finances?" "Bad enough that Megan's position was contingent on your father leveraging assets he doesn't actually have." She handed me the envelope. "Everything's in here. I'm sorry. I didn't know about the family dynamics when I got involved." Through the archway, I could see my family's table descending into chaos. My mother was crying silently. My father was making urgent phone calls. Megan sat frozen, staring at nothing. "Sometimes," I said, taking the envelope, "the truth is the best revenge." I walked out into the night, leaving behind the carefully constructed facade of the Turner family success story. In my bag, the envelope felt heavy with possibilities and consequences. The Heritage Capital envelope sat unopened on my kitchen counter for 3 days. Daniel watched me circle it like a shark, coffee cup in hand, each morning before work. "Just read it," he said on the 4th morning, sliding a fresh cup toward me. "Whatever's in there can't be worse than what you're imagining." I traced the logo with my finger. Victoria said it was bad, but how bad can... My phone buzzed. Megan's name flashed on the screen. The first contact since the restaurant disaster. The text was simple. "We need to talk, alone, please." "Don't," Daniel warned, but I was already grabbing my keys. I found Megan in our old tree house, of all places, at our grandparents' house. She sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, looking smaller somehow, less polished than usual. A manila folder lay in her lap. "Did you know," she asked without looking up, "about the forgeries?" My heart stuttered. "What forgeries?" She laughed, but it sounded wrong, hollow. "The patents, my precious patents. Turns out Dad's been paying people to put my name on other people's work for years." She finally looked at me, eyes red-rimmed. "Did you know?" I sank down opposite her, the old boards creaking. "No, but I'm not surprised. Victoria's threatening to expose everything unless I step down from the heritage position." She pushed the folder toward me. But that's not even the worst part. Inside were bank statements, property liens, and a document that made my blood run cold. A power of attorney form with my grandfather's signature. Dated last week. "Dad's been embezzling from Grandpa's accounts," Megan whispered, using his dementia diagnosis as cover. Except Grandpa doesn't have dementia," I finished. The pieces clicked into place. The trust fund questions, Victoria's discomfort, our mother's missing ring. "They've been lying to everyone," Megan continued, "building this perfect facade while stealing and cheating and—" She broke off, hands shaking. "I thought I earned it all. I really believed." The treehouse door creaked. We both jumped as our grandmother's head appeared. "I thought I'd find you two here," Eleanor said, climbing up with surprising agility. "I see you've found some answers." "You knew?" Megan asked. "I've known for months." Eleanor settled between us, her face hard. "Your grandfather and I have been gathering evidence. We needed you both to see the truth for yourselves." My phone buzzed again. A message from Victoria. "Board meeting tomorrow. Both Turner sisters requested to attend, decision time." "They're going to lose everything," Megan said quietly. "The house, their reputation, maybe even face charges." I thought about the Heritage Capital envelope still sitting on my counter. About years of watching my parents architect their elaborate deceptions. About Megan's face when she realized her whole life was built on lies. "Maybe they deserve to lose it all," I said. "Maybe we all do." Megan stood up, brushing dust from her designer pants. "I'm going to decline the heritage position, and," she hesitated, "I'm going to tell Victoria everything. About the patents, the fraud, all of it." Eleanor reached for my hand. "Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't taking something from someone," she said softly. "Sometimes it's letting them face the consequences of their own actions." I watched Megan climb down, looking more like my sister than she had in years. The manila folder sat heavy in my lap, filled with evidence of our parents' betrayal. But something else weighed heavier. The realization that my revenge fantasy had never accounted for collateral damage. "What happens now?" I asked Eleanor. She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "Now you go home and open that envelope from Heritage. Make your decision based on what you want, not what will hurt them most." As I drove home, my phone lit up with notifications. Megan was already talking to Victoria. My parents were calling repeatedly. But all I could think about was that envelope waiting on my counter, and how revenge sometimes looks different than we expect. Daniel was still there when I got home, the envelope now accompanied by takeout containers and 2 glasses of wine. "Ready?" he asked. I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight one last time. Ready to find out what justice really looks like. The Heritage Capital boardroom felt like a tomb. 15 pairs of eyes watched as Victoria laid out the evidence. Financial records, forged patents, falsified credentials, all neatly arranged like funeral flowers. "As you can see," Victoria concluded, "the situation with the Turner accounts requires immediate action." I sat at one end of the table, Megan at the other. Between us lay the wreckage of our family's carefully constructed lies. My sister's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. "The board requires an explanation," the CEO stated, his gaze shifting between us. Miss Turner, either of you." Before I could speak, my father burst through the doors. "This meeting is unnecessary," he announced, straightening his tie. "I can explain everything." "Michael," Victoria warned, but he was already launching into his performance. "A simple misunderstanding about family investments," he said smoothly. "Nothing that can't be resolved privately." I watched him deploy the same tactics that had worked for decades. The confident smile, the subtle manipulation, the implied threats wrapped in courtesy. But something was different now. "Actually," Megan interrupted, standing up, "I'd like to make a statement." Our father's smile flickered. "Sweetheart, let me handle." "I've been accepting credit for other people's work since I was 16, Megan continued, her voice growing stronger. "The patents aren't mine, the credentials are enhanced, and the financial records." She looked directly at me. "I'm sorry, Amelia, I knew about some of it. Not all, but enough." The boardroom erupted in whispers. Victoria slid a document toward me, my official offer letter for the senior analyst position. Next to it lay Megan's resignation. My father's mask cracked. "You ungrateful!" He lunged for the documents, but security was already moving in. "Mr. Turner," the CEO's voice cut through the chaos, "I suggest you leave before we contact the authorities." As security escorted him out, my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Your grandmother needs you. Emergency." I found Eleanor in the hospital waiting room, her usual composure shattered. "Your mother tried to access your grandfather's accounts one last time," she said. "When he confronted her, she... Is he okay?" "Mild heart attack, he's stable." She gripped my hand. "But there's more. Before this happened, he changed his will. Everything goes to you now, not just your share, everything." My phone kept buzzing. Missed calls from my parents, messages from Megan, emails from Heritage Capital demanding decisions. The weight of it all pressed down like concrete. "I never wanted this," I whispered. "No?" Eleanor's voice turned sharp. "Then what did you want, Amelia? Revenge? Justice? Or just for someone to finally see you?" The truth hit like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on exposing their lies, I hadn't noticed how much I'd started to mirror them, measuring success in destruction, victory in others' losses. A commotion erupted down the hall. My mother's voice, shrill and desperate. "You can't keep me from my own husband." "Watch me," Megan replied. I turned to see my sister blocking our mother's path, looking more like our grandmother than ever. "Choosing sides now?" I asked, as Megan joined us. "Choosing truth," she replied. "Finally." My phone buzzed one last time. Heritage Capital needed an answer about the position. Accept or decline. Take everything or walk away. Continue the cycle of ambition and revenge, or break it entirely. Eleanor watched me stare at the message. "Your grandfather once told me that true power isn't in what you can take from others," she said. "It's in what you choose to walk away from." I looked at my sister, who had lost everything she thought she wanted and found something real instead. At my grandmother, who had watched this tragedy unfold for 2 generations. At my phone, still buzzing with the echoes of ambition and destruction. "I need to make a call," I said, standing up, "but not to Heritage Capital." Megan's eyes met mine, understanding dawning. "The prosecutor's office?" I nodded. "Someone needs to stop the cycle. Might as well be us." As I walked away to make the call that would finally end our family's legacy of lies, I heard my grandmother whisper to Megan, "Sometimes the greatest revenge is choosing to be nothing like those who hurt you." The prosecutor's preliminary hearing fell on the same day as my Heritage Capital promotion party. I stood in my apartment, staring at 2 outfits laid across my bed, a sharp courtroom suit and a celebration dress. Daniel watched from the doorway, coffee in hand. "You could cancel the party," he suggested, "and let them win again." I smoothed the dress's fabric. "Everything's arranged. Victoria's bringing the board members. Grandfather's being released from the hospital specifically to attend." My phone lit up with a news alert. Turner Financial. Under investigation. Prominent family faces fraud allegations. Below it, a photo of my parents leaving their lawyer's office. my mother's face hidden behind large sunglasses, my father's hand raised against the cameras. "They're calling it a witch hunt," I said, scrolling through the article, claiming Megan and I orchestrated this out of jealousy. Speaking of Megan, Daniel nodded toward my window. She stood on the sidewalk below, looking up at my building. Even from here, I could see she'd lost weight, her designer clothes hanging loose. When she spotted me, she held up a manila envelope. 10 minutes later, she sat at my kitchen counter. "They're trying to pin everything on me," she said, pushing the envelope toward me. "Dad's lawyers say I acted alone, forged his signatures, manipulated the accounts without his knowledge." "That's ridiculous," I started, but she cut me off. "I'm pleading guilty." The words hung in the air like smoke. Daniel quietly left the room. "You can't," I said. "We have evidence." "They have evidence too. Real or manufactured, it doesn't matter." She looked older suddenly, tired. Someone has to take the fall. Better me than both of us. "This isn't what I wanted," my voice cracked. "I wanted justice, not..." "Justice?" She laughed bitterly. "Look around, Amelia, there's no justice here, just wreckage." My phone buzzed. The Heritage Capital CEO. "Reconsidering position in light of recent developments. Need to meet before announcement party." They're pulling the offer, I realized. Everything we've done, everything we've lost, and they're still winning. Megan stood up. "The party's in 3 hours. Make it count." She left before I could respond, the manila envelope still sitting between us like a bomb. The Heritage Capital boardroom felt colder this time. Victoria wouldn't meet my eyes as the CEO spoke about public perception and company image. I watched my career evaporate in carefully worded corporate speak. "We understand this is disappointing," he concluded. "Disappointing?" I stood up slowly. "You know what's disappointing? Watching your parents build an empire on lies. Watching your sister sacrifice herself to protect them. Realizing that even when you win, you lose." Victoria finally looked at me. "Amelia, the party starts in an hour," I continued. "Every major financial player in the city will be there, expecting to celebrate my promotion. Should I tell them the truth about Heritage Capital's integrity? About how quickly you abandon principles when things get complicated?" The CEO's expression hardened. "Are you threatening us, Miss Turner?" "I'm offering a choice, the same choice you're giving me." My phone buzzed again. "Grandmother Eleanor, your grandfather's had another episode. We can't make it tonight. I'm so sorry." The hits kept coming, each one chipping away at whatever was left of my resolve. By the time I reached the venue, I felt hollow. Daniel met me at the entrance. "We can still cancel." "No," I said, watching the guests arrive. "We're going to give them exactly what they expect. A perfect performance, just like my parents taught us." I spotted my mother in the crowd, thinner but still elegant, still playing her part. Megan stood alone by the bar, already drawing sympathetic glances. My father was notably absent, probably meeting with lawyers, planning his next move. "Ladies and gentlemen," the Heritage Capital CEO's voice boomed through the speakers. "We have an announcement about tonight's celebration." I gripped my champagne glass tighter, feeling the stem threaten to snap. The crowd turned expectantly, eager for another helping of Turner family drama. "Time to face the music," I muttered. Daniel squeezed my hand. "Remember what your grandmother said about true power?" But all I could think about was how revenge felt exactly like failure, and how sometimes winning meant losing everything you thought you wanted. The CEO approached the microphone, and I straightened my spine, ready for one last performance in this family tragedy we'd all helped write. The Heritage Capital CEO never finished his announcement. My father burst through the doors, Victoria Hayes at his side, both clutching identical manila folders. "I think," my father announced to the stunned crowd, "we should discuss the real reason we're here tonight." The room shifted like a living thing, guests gravitating toward the promised drama. I caught Megan's eye across the space. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Michael," Victoria stepped forward, her voice carrying. "Don't do this." He ignored her, addressing the crowd. My daughters have orchestrated quite a performance, a tale of parental neglect, financial misconduct, and corporate espionage. But they forgot one detail. He opened his folder. The paper trail. Interesting timing, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Considering Megan's guilty plea was filed this morning. The crowd murmured. My mother's champagne glass shattered on the marble floor. A plea she's withdrawing, my father countered, after discovering who really manipulated the accounts. He pulled out a document, but before he could continue, Victoria stepped between us. That's enough, Michael. Tell them who really wrote those documents. Tell them about the offshore accounts. Tell them about Eleanor. The room went silent. My grandmother's name hung in the air like smoke. What about Eleanor? My mother's voice cracked. She's been playing us all, my father said. For years. Oh, setting up accounts, documenting conversations, building a case. To protect her granddaughters. Eleanor's voice cut through the room. She stood in the doorway, Grandfather George beside her in a wheelchair. Someone had to. By destroying our family, my mother demanded. By saving what was left of it. Eleanor moved through the crowd like a queen. I watched you break these girls for 20 years, one with impossible expectations, the other with calculated indifference. Did you really think I'd let that continue? Victoria opened her own folder. Mrs. Mitchell provided evidence of systematic financial manipulation dating back to Amelia's 13th birthday, the same day as Megan's first major award. My father lunged for the documents, but Daniel stepped between them. The crowd pressed closer, phones recording everything. It's over, Dad, Megan said quietly. I'm not taking the fall for you anymore. After everything we gave you gave her a prison, I interrupted. You gave me invisibility. Grandmother gave us a choice. Eleanor reached for both our hands. I gave them the truth, and now they're giving it back to you. The Heritage Capital CEO cleared his throat. In light of these developments, the board has made a decision. He turned to me. Miss Turner, Amelia, we'd like to offer you a different position, head of our new corporate ethics division. My father laughed bitterly. Ethics? From the daughter who orchestrated her own family's downfall? No, I said. From the daughter who finally understood that real power isn't in destroying people. It's in changing systems that destroy people. I looked at Megan. Both positions are open, if you want to build something real this time. The room erupted in chaos. Reporters pushing forward, phones flashing, security moving in. Through it all, I watched my parents' carefully constructed world crumble, not with a bang, but with quiet revelations and harder truths. I never wanted to destroy them, I told Eleanor later, as security escorted my parents out. I just wanted to be seen, she finished. I know, that's why I kept every receipt, every conversation, every piece of evidence. Not for revenge, but for the day you both would need to see the whole truth. Megan joined us, her designer armor finally showing cracks. What happens now? Now, I said, watching Victoria hand the final documents to the prosecutors waiting discreetly by the door. We build something new, something true. The party dissolved into whispered conversations and hurried exits, leaving behind empty champagne glasses and shattered illusions. But in the wreckage, I saw something I'd missed before, the possibility of reconstruction. Daniel appeared with our coats. Ready to go? I looked at the remains of our family's public implosion, my parents' disgrace, Megan's uncertainty, Eleanor's quiet victory. The weight of 2 decades of carefully documented pain finally exposed to light. Yes, I said, taking one last look at the chaos we'd created. I think we all are. The sentencing hearing fell on a quiet Tuesday. I sat in the courtroom, watching my father's shoulders slump as the judge delivered his verdict. 5 years for fraud, with additional penalties pending. My mother sobbed silently in the row behind him, her designer outfit replaced by something understated and worn. Megan squeezed my hand. She'd testified last week, her immunity deal secured in exchange for exposing the full scope of our father's schemes. Now she sat beside me instead of them, the distance between rows marking years of manufactured rivalry. The court also orders full restitution, the judge continued, to be paid to the affected parties, including Heritage Capital and George Mitchell. I caught Eleanor's eye across the aisle. She nodded once, the gesture carrying the weight of 2 decades of careful documentation, of quiet resistance, of protection offered in the only way she knew how. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like hungry birds. Victoria managed the press with practiced efficiency, steering questions toward Heritage Capital's new corporate ethics initiative rather than the family drama behind it. "Miss Turner," one reporter called out, "any comment on your father's conviction?" Before I could respond, my mother pushed through the crowd. "Amelia, please." Her voice cracked. "We can still fix this. Family means—" "Nothing," Megan interrupted, stepping between us. "Family means nothing without truth." Our mother recoiled as if struck. For the first time, I saw her clearly, not as the architect of our pain, but as someone trapped in her own carefully constructed prison of appearances. Daniel waited by the car, holding a familiar manila envelope. "Your grandmother asked me to give you this. Said it's the last piece." Inside was a single photograph. Me at 13, holding my science fair certificate, beaming at the camera. On the back, in Eleanor's elegant script, the moment I knew I had to choose sides. She was watching, I realized. All along, she was watching and documenting and waiting. "Not waiting," Eleanor said, appearing beside us. "Preparing. There's a difference between revenge and justice, dear. Revenge burns fast and leaves ashes. Justice takes time and leaves room for growth." At the office later, I found Megan in our shared space, reorganizing files. The corporate ethics division plaque gleamed on the wall between our degrees. Both real now, both earned. "Dad's lawyer called," she said without looking up. "He wants to appeal." "Let him." I settled at my desk. "The evidence speaks for itself." "That's not what I meant." She finally met my eyes. "He wants us to support the appeal. Says he'll reveal grandmother's role if we don't." I thought about the photograph in my bag, about choices and consequences, and the slow burn of truth. "Tell him to go ahead," I said. "Some stories need to be told completely." Victoria knocked on our door, tablet in hand. "Board meeting in 10. They want to discuss expanding the ethics initiative nationwide." As we walked to the conference room, I caught our reflection in the glass walls. 2 sisters, moving in sync, no longer separated by manufactured competition. Behind us, our team carried folders filled with new cases, new chances to prevent other families from fracturing under the weight of ambition. My phone buzzed, a message from Eleanor. "Your grandfather wants you both for dinner. Says he's ready to tell you about your father's childhood. Some stories can only be understood looking backward." I showed Megan the message. She smiled, a real one this time. "Think we're ready for more truth?" "Truth isn't about ready," I replied, pushing open the boardroom door. "It's about necessary." The board members waited expectantly. Their faces turned toward us. The Turner sisters, no longer divided, no longer defined by our parents' choices. I opened my presentation, the first slide showing that old science fair project about water filtration, about making something clean from something tainted. "Let's talk about transparency," I began, feeling Megan's steady presence beside me. "And how to build systems that make it impossible to hide." Behind us, the city skyline stretched endless and bright, full of buildings and boardrooms and families just like ours, full of stories waiting to be uncovered, truths waiting to be told, full of chances to choose justice over revenge, growth over destruction, truth over appearance, full of possibilities we'd finally learned to see.
My father's divorce from my mother came as a shock, primarily because he left her for his much younger secretary. At 57, after a promotion to CEO at the company where he'd started as an intern 27 years ago, he found himself in a new chapter of life, leaving behind my mother, who was 49 at the time. My mother, a self-made owner of a successful news channel company, handled the divorce with grace and resilience, ensuring she secured her fair share of their shared assets, including the family home and a significant portion of their savings. Despite the challenges, she remained poised and dignified, a quality I've always admired in her. I'm a 27-year-old graphic designer skills, making my own path and preparing to launch my own business. My passion for graphic design was ignited early on, influenced by my mother's involvement in the digital world since the onset of the internet revolution. This early exposure allowed me to start earning a substantial income by the end of high school. Growing up, my parents were a dynamic team, both ambitious and devoted to their careers, which unfortunately left little time for each other, leading to them growing apart over the years. Their separation was amicable. They never resorted to bitterness or blame. As for me, having moved into a spacious one-bedroom apartment during college funded by my freelance work, I've enjoyed my independence and tried to maintain balanced relationships with both parents post-divorce. However, when my stepmother, my father's new partner, began trying to assert control over me, I had to stand my ground and set boundaries to preserve my autonomy. In this complex family dynamic, each of us has navigated personal and professional challenges, always striving to find our own version of happiness and success amidst the changes life throws our way. I am a mature adult and have maintained a close relationship with both of my parents, although I've always been a bit closer to my mom. My respect for my dad grew from watching him support and celebrate my mom's achievements. However, their marriage ended when my mom discovered that dad was involved with his secretary, Ellie, and she asked him to leave. Despite the company's strict policy against dating coworkers, my dad tried to keep the relationship discreet until he could plan his next steps. Unfortunately, Ellie shared their relationship with her friends at work, leading to both of them being fired from their jobs. Recently, I bought a luxurious 3-bedroom penthouse, a significant milestone for me. Last week, my dad visited and asked if he and Ellie, who he plans to marry next month, could stay with me. He's currently without a job, trying to start new business ventures, and they're both living off their savings since losing their jobs. I asked for some time to think over his request because I value my privacy, and having them live with me could disrupt that. My dad assured me they would be unobtrusive, and I wouldn't even notice their presence. I spoke with my mom about it, and she encouraged me to make my own decision, reassuring me that she harbors no ill feelings and trusts my judgment. I want to help my dad. He has always been caring and supportive. However, I'm apprehensive about how Ellie might fit into our lives. It's a tough decision, and I'm torn between helping my father and maintaining my own space. I eventually decided to let them move in after their wedding. They had a lavish ceremony and a honeymoon, which surprised me given their financial situation. Since moving in, Ellie has not shown any initiative to find a job and often has visitors over, from family to new friends she meets randomly. Her 7-year-old daughter, who lives with them, tends to be quite unruly and demanding. This situation has placed a strain on my daily life, and I am left wondering how long this arrangement can last. I am reaching out for advice from anyone who has been in a similar situation, as I could really use some guidance on how to handle this delicate family dynamic. It's curious how some people are considered social butterflies, yet their daily routine primarily involves sitting at home, chatting away, and not doing much else. This always struck me as peculiar, especially compared to my mother, who was always on the move. Even when most people relaxed on weekends, she was active, a stark contrast to the new woman in my dad's life, Ellie. I sometimes wonder if my dad has been entirely honest with Ellie about his financial situation. Given the costly divorce where he lost much to my mom, it's hard to believe he's as well off as Ellie seems to think. As for my personal life, it's taken a delightful turn. I've recently gotten close to William, a budding brand identity designer who was once just a client. Our professional relationship turned romantic after I began editing her videos and we met in person. William is wonderful, and we enjoy our time together, usually at her place, which she shares with her younger sister and a few pets. They inherited the house from their grandfather, under whose care they remained until his passing. On the home front, things could be better. Ellie, despite not being outright troublesome, has started to overstep her boundaries a bit. It's only happened a couple of times, but I've made it clear I won't tolerate any intrusion into my personal space. If she steps out of line, I'll make sure to set firm boundaries. I proposed to William last week, and she said yes. It might seem quick to some, but I've always been sure about her. Meanwhile, the situation with Ellie at home remains tense. Although initially unobtrusive, she's begun to critique my lifestyle, which I find annoying and unwarranted. My dad has tried to manage the situation after I brought it to his attention, but it's been a delicate issue. Ellie didn't react well to the criticism, but fortunately, she hasn't acted out in response. As for me, I'm just looking forward to building a future with William and hoping for some peace at home. 9 months ago, my father embarked on a business trip to San Francisco to meet with his investors. During his absence, my stepmother, Ellie, seized the opportunity to make my life difficult. She started issuing commands for me to take care of all the household chores, washing dishes, doing laundry, and even mowing the lawn. However, I paid no heed to her demands. I prepared my meals and managed the cleaning on my own schedule. It was, after all, my house, and I was not about to let anyone dictate how I should live in it. Ellie did not take kindly to being ignored. On one occasion, she exploded in frustration, labeling me a lazy freeloader living off my father's wealth. She was utterly mistaken about my circumstances. I am actually a career coach, working from home due to the nature of my job. Ellie, under the false impression that I was jobless, thought I spent my days idly surfing the internet. I considered correcting her assumptions about the ownership of the house and my financial independence, but I hesitated. I was unsure of what my father might have told her, and I didn't want to risk damaging their relationship. Thus, I decided to let her remain unaware until my father returned from his trip, especially since he was already under considerable stress from his business dealings. Ellie's daughter, who seems to be following in her footsteps, added to the chaos by damaging my belongings and causing general mayhem around the house. Throughout that month, Ellie's behavior became increasingly challenging. Her constant nagging and demands escalated to the point where I avoided common areas just to keep away from her. She even resorted to knocking on my door to order me around, making me feel trapped in my own home. Upon my father's return, I immediately addressed the issue of Ellie's behavior. I explained that I could no longer tolerate living under the same roof with her unless she changed her ways. My father apologized on her behalf and revealed that she was 3 months pregnant, suggesting that her hormones were to blame. I remembered how my father divorced my mother over similar issues and wondered how he would handle the situation with Ellie. I expressed my desire to move forward with my life, particularly mentioning my plans with William, my girlfriend, with whom I was considering settling down. I hinted at the need for privacy in the foreseeable future. My father reassured me that his business would stabilize within 3 months, hopefully allowing him to find a separate living arrangement. Curiously, when I asked if Ellie knew the house was actually mine, he avoided the question, which led me to believe he hadn't informed her of this fact. For the time being, I find solace in staying at William's place, away from the stress at home. I am hopeful for a resolution where I can finally have my space back, free from Ellie's disruptive presence. I recently proposed to William, planning to marry her in the upcoming months. However, just a month after our engagement, Ellie began causing trouble. Usually, I spend most of my days at Ellie's place, but this time, due to a severe viral fever that left me bedridden, I stayed at my own house. Ellie, who rarely visits, took this opportunity to come over. William stayed with me for a few days to care for me during my illness. Ellie used this chance to try and turn William against me. She falsely accused me of being lazy and not contributing to household tasks, claiming that she does all the cooking and cleaning. Ellie even went as far as to say that my lack of involvement was due to a patriarchal upbringing, pointing out that my father never helped during her pregnancy and she had to manage everything alone. Moreover, Ellie insinuated that I was unfaithful, much like my father had been, alleging that I had cheated on William and brought other women to our house. When William questioned her about these women, Ellie described them in such a way that William recognized them as merely my friends and co-workers. William returned to her home the following day, seeming unsure about our relationship. When I visited her after recovering, she expressed doubts about rushing into things. Sensing Ellie's influence, I confronted William, who reluctantly revealed what Ellie had told her. I explained to William that Ellie was deceitfully portraying herself as a victim due to misconceptions about our family's financial situation. Realizing the extent of Ellie's manipulation, I knew I needed to remove this toxic influence from our lives. I confronted Ellie at home, telling her to stop her deceit. In response, she defiantly claimed ownership of the house and threatened legal action. I firmly told her the house was legally mine, a fact she was unaware of, and warned her to leave if she continued her behavior. Throughout this ordeal, I learned the importance of clear communication and support in a relationship. William needed a partner who would actively share household responsibilities, not someone who left everything to her. By addressing the issue head-on with Ellie and committing to being a more engaged partner, I hope to rebuild trust with William and move forward together. The tension in my home had reached a boiling point. In a fit of anger, she grabbed my collar, attempting to drag me out of the house. I managed to break free and sternly warned her against touching me again. Just then, my father arrived, likely alerted by her during the heated moment when I was disposing of her belongings. My father tried to calm me down, but I couldn't contain my frustration and blurted out that he had made a significant mistake by allowing her into our lives. She egged my father on, hoping he would reprimand me for my harsh words, but instead, he shouted at her to remain quiet. She persisted, urging him to kick me out. That's when my father disclosed that the house actually belonged to me, which took her by surprise, and she labeled him a betrayer. In the heat of that moment, I told my father to take her away, unable to tolerate her attempts to disrupt my engagement and my life. After a while, as they packed up to leave, I overheard her bad-mouthing me, my father, and even my mother. I was tempted to confront her physically, but decided against escalating the situation further. A week has passed since they left, and while I felt a sense of relief at standing up to her, it's undeniable that my relationship with my father has suffered. I regret the harsh words exchanged, but hope my father understands how important William is to me and how detrimental her interference was. The next day, I visited my mother and recounted the events. She found humor in the situation and, over a glass of wine, invited William to dinner to clear the air about the dynamics in our family. My mother, a woman of substantial grace and wit, reassured William of my father's respect and support despite their separation. She advised me to give William the space to make her own decisions, leaving me hopeful for a resolution. My mother jokingly referred to the other woman as a serial chaser, predicting she'd soon be on the lookout for another affluent partner now that she knew of my father's financial troubles. This brought a lighter mood to the situation, and despite the rift with my father, I felt less burdened, ready to move forward and leave this chapter behind. A minimum. I couldn't attend the event, but according to my boyfriend, he met up with some friends at their Airbnb rental on that day. Later, his former professor arrived at the Airbnb, bringing along a few of her girlfriends. They all stayed there overnight. The next day, they attended the event together and afterwards went out for drinks at a bar. Most of them had quite a bit to drink, except for my boyfriend, who chose to be the designated driver for his professor and her friends. During the event, his professor won a model kit, and despite being somewhat inebriated, she asked my boyfriend to help her assemble it later that night. My boyfriend assures me that nothing inappropriate occurred after they returned from the event. Since then, this group has stayed in touch through a group chat, planning and discussing upcoming events. My boyfriend and his friends have since met his professor's fiancée at an anime convention, and it seems like everyone got along well. The professor continues to show interest in attending more events with my boyfriend and his group. I trust my boyfriend completely and don't believe he's hiding anything from me. However, I must admit I find their friendship a bit unusual since she is his professor. We've discussed this, and he reassures me that I have nothing to worry about. Recently, after a heart-to-heart conversation, my boyfriend acknowledged that their interaction might have crossed some of my boundaries. He explained that the professor might act this way because she often feels bored when hanging out with her fiancé's friends and might be seeking attention from others. Following our discussion, He spoke with her about maintaining more distance in their friendship out of respect for my feelings. She understood and agreed, explaining that she sees him like a brother, which is why she felt so comfortable around him. I'd love to hear others' thoughts on this situation. Is this something I should be concerned about, or is it genuinely harmless? Thank you for sharing your insights. She is also a member of his Discord chat, where one of his friends invited her to attend a model building show and dinner. I decided to go as well to meet her personally. The dinner was first, and it turned out to be quite awkward. She almost entirely ignored me that evening. When she arrived at the table, she greeted my boyfriend but not me, which even he noticed and felt compelled to introduce us. As the night progressed, she became more inebriated and began making odd remarks about my boyfriend to his friends, mentioning things like he could have been the top student if only he hadn't missed a particular assignment. She even brought up how my boyfriend had given her 3-star review on Rate My Professor. Ultimately, she didn't attend the show, but afterwards, my boyfriend and his friends decided to honor my feelings by planning a men-only night in the future. I'm really looking to get other people's perspectives on this situation to determine if her behavior seems suspicious.
My older sister, Mia, who is 26, has always had difficulty accepting my happiness, seemingly envious of a life she believed I didn't deserve. Despite her beauty and intelligence, Mia's life took a tumultuous turn after she dropped out of college to marry a wealthy man who eventually left her after seeing her true nature. Now divorced and jobless, she lives with our parents. Growing up, Mia was the star in our family's eyes, always receiving their praises, which left me feeling inadequate and overlooked. Her constant taunts during our childhood amplified my insecurities, as she would mock me, saying that no one liked me. Her actions and words created a deep-rooted sense of insecurity in me, and any attempt to voice my feelings was dismissed by our parents, who seemed blind to her manipulative behavior. As we grew older, her narcissistic traits became more apparent. She engaged in several harmful antics, like sabotaging my school projects and using my phone to send embarrassing photos to my friends, all to maintain her superior status at home. Despite the occasional scolding from Dad, Mia never faced any real consequences, which only encouraged her behavior. Things started looking up for me after high school. I worked hard, got into my dream college, and eventually landed a job that brought me great fulfillment. It was there that I met Mark, a wonderful man who soon became my partner. Our relationship flourished, filled with travel and adventure, and I was cautious about introducing him to my family due to Mia's unpredictable nature. However, as our wedding approached, my worst fears materialized. Mia attempted to seduce Mark, an act caught on camera, which finally exposed her manipulative tendencies to everyone, including our parents. Shocked by her actions, they could no longer ignore the truth and had to confront the reality of her behavior, which led to her being disowned. This painful revelation, while difficult, brought us certain relief. It marked a turning point where I could finally step out from under the shadow of Mia's influence and embrace a life with Mark, free from the turmoil that had overshadowed my 2 years. Despite my relationship with Mark flourishing, I couldn't put off introducing him to my family any longer. After dating for a year and a half, Mark began to question my hesitation. So I spoke with my dad, who was thrilled to hear I'd found someone who he deemed worthy of me. He promptly invited us over for dinner. While I was excited, I also felt stressed knowing my sister Mia's tendency to disrupt my life. Aware of my family dynamics, I had a thorough conversation with Mark about the situation. He was understanding and reassured me that he would handle whatever came our way. A few days after talking to my dad, Mia unexpectedly called me. It was odd, considering she never reached out first. She was oddly inquisitive about Mark and my plans to visit home, clearly probing for information, likely prompted by our mom who'd mentioned my serious relationship. Mia's sudden warmth seemed strategic, and it raised alarms about her intentions. Concerned, I pondered whether introducing Mark to Mia was worth the risk or if it would be safer to have my parents visit us instead. Reflecting on Mia's history helps explain my caution. Her academic prowess was overshadowed by her obsession with appearance once she started college. During this time, she met William, a wealthy man, and quickly prioritized him over her studies. While I was preparing for my college entrance exams, Mia taunted me, claiming I'd never get into my dream school. Yet, when I did, and our parents celebrated my achievement, Mia couldn't handle the shift in attention. She impulsively announced her engagement to William during my celebration party, stealing the spotlight despite William's obvious surprise. Mia always flaunted the lavish gifts William gave her, taunting me by saying I'd never attract someone wealthy because of my looks. Her materialistic views were starkly opposed to my values. I believed in independence, not reliance on someone else's wealth. Shortly after, Mia and William held a grand wedding, predominantly funded by William, with my dad covering some costs out of formality. Their marriage lasted only 5 years, falling apart when Mia decided she didn't want children, a detail she had apparently never discussed with William. During my college years, I distanced myself, returning home only during holidays when Mia was usually away with William. Given all these experiences, my concerns about introducing Mark to this volatile mix-up family drama seemed well-founded. The advice I received from friends and the broader community only emphasized the need for careful handling of the situation, something I intended to manage with as much grace and caution as possible. William had always wanted to become a father, but he was disappointed that Mia had never been open about her reluctance to have children. He felt misled, as she had avoided the topic throughout their 5-year marriage. William also shared troubling behaviors of Mia, such as her frequent partying, flirting with other men at bars, and a clear focus on his wealth rather than emotional connection. He even showed me videos of her behaving inappropriately with other men during her nights out, reinforcing his relief at their separation. Despite William's grievances, my parents took Mia's side, blaming William for pressuring her about children and ignoring her problematic actions. After their divorce, Mia moved back in with my parents. Having dropped out of college to marry William, she now found herself without a degree or job prospects 5 years later. She pretended to be traumatized by the divorce, but quickly returned to a lifestyle of clubbing and casual relationships, flaunting her escapades on Instagram. 2 years into my career, I landed my new job and was doing very well financially, which thrilled my parents. During a celebratory dinner at home, Mia came back looking disheveled and partially intoxicated. This upset my dad, who expressed disappointment that Mia hadn't pursued her education and career like I had. He pointed out her financial dependency on them, which led my mom to caution him against such remarks. Mia, overhearing this, stormed off angrily. This was a turning point for my dad, who realized how indulged Mia had become. He urged my mom to encourage Mia to take responsibility for her life. That evening, Mia confronted me, trying to belittle me by mocking my appearance and claiming I could never match up to her, no matter my financial success. Her words no longer hurt me like they used to. Instead, I laughed off her insults and suggested she needed to adjust her attitude. This infuriated Mia, and she demanded I leave the house. I reminded her that it was our parents' home, not hers to control. The next day, as I packed to leave, I discovered that 3 of my dresses had been deliberately damaged. I showed them to my parents, revealing Mia's latest act of spite. My dad was furious and confronted Mia, but my mom attempted to downplay the incident, suggesting Mia was just acting out of shock. My dad had enough and sternly warned Mia that he could no longer financially support her or tolerate her destructive behavior. This confrontation only deepened Mia's resentment towards me, marking a clear divide in our already strained relationship. Having endured Mia's relentless hostility, I was initially indifferent to her antics, but things escalated when she began making advances towards my boyfriend, Mark. After much contemplation and discussion with Mark, we decided it was necessary for him to meet my family, including Mia. My friends suggested it was better to see how Mark would handle the situation sooner rather than later. When we arrived at my parents' houses, Mia's behavior was embarrassingly transparent. She had dyed her hair black and dressed up excessively, as though she was trying to impress Mark on a date. During introductions, she pushed her way into greeting Mark with an overly enthusiastic hug, ignoring everyone else's discomfort. At dinner, she made every attempt to insert herself into our conversation, claiming to share all of Mark's interests and exaggerating their compatibility, complete with suggestive winks. It was painfully obvious to everyone, including a very uncomfortable Mark, that she was trying too hard. Later, when I took a moment to shower, she seized the opportunity to ask Mark to help her find her phone, a thinly veiled excuse to get his number. Mia even resorted to sharing her tales of woe about her divorce, trying to elicit sympathy from Mark while our mother joined in to criticize William, Mia's ex. When Mark suggested a walk around the neighborhood to me, Mia quickly volunteered to join, only to be awkwardly rebuffed by Mark, who clarified he wanted time alone with me. Embarrassed, Mia retreated. Since that visit, I've been bracing myself for more of Mia's schemes to win over Mark. Despite my fears, I trust Mark and am curious to see how he handles her continued advances. Shortly after our visit, Mark proposed during a trip, and of course, I was ecstatic. Even after our engagement, Mia didn't give up. She began sending Mark messages filled with cat videos, a peculiar strategy given her known indifference to cats. She even went as far as to adopt a cat to further this new facade. Initially, Mark shared Mia's messages with me, showcasing her attempts to appear caring and involved. But after a while, he stopped mentioning them, which I interpreted as his way of sparing me the ongoing annoyance. This subtle shift in his handling of Mia's tactics only reinforced my trust in his loyalty and understanding of the delicate family dynamics we navigated together. After Mia's unsuccessful attempts to woo Mark, it seemed she had moved on, and so had we. Life was bustling with our demanding jobs, and honestly, we had far better things to focus on. However, a random scroll through social media revealed that Mia had recently connected with Mark's account, actively liking and commenting on nearly every post of his, even digging through archives as old as 7 to 8 years. Feeling uneasy, I impulsively checked Mark's phone and found that Mia had been sporadically texting him, although he hadn't read her messages. Her persistence appeared in the form of missed calls too, including one at 4:10 a.m., which really set off alarms for me. I confronted Marabut, not informing me of her continued attempts to contact him. He seemed nervous, but explained that he had been ignoring her to avoid drama, thinking it best not to worry me. Mark then shared that during one late-night call, Mia had reached out in distress, rambling about her traumatic experiences with William. He had answered out of concern, fearing something was wrong. When she began to offload her emotional baggage, Mark advised her to speak with her parents instead and emphasized that such late calls were inappropriate. He also told her she should have discussed it with me first. Disturbed by his omission, I expressed my discomfort with him keeping this from me, fearing it might erode my trust. Although he reassured me that he was not swayed by her tactics, I couldn't help but recall countless stories where such situations had led to betrayal. I insisted that any future calls from Mia should be handed to me, hoping to catch her in the act myself. Eventually, that moment came. He woke me in the middle of the night as her number flashed on the screen. When I answered, she hung up after realizing it wasn't Mark. The next day, I called her multiple times to confront her, but she didn't answer. I then texted her from Mark's phone, sternly warning her against contacting him at odd hours and stating that any urgent matter should be directed to me, not him. After that, she ceased her communications with him, and I felt a sense of relief. However, the peace was short-lived. After Mark proposed to me, and I shared our engagement news with my family, Mia resumed her old habits, bombarding Mark with messages and videos. Fed up, I called her out on her behavior, releasing all my pent-up frustration during the call. She barely responded, but the aftermath was immediate. My mother called, furious, accusing me of treating Mia harshly. She claimed my actions had caused Mia panic attacks and urged me to be more considerate towards her sister, who was supposedly struggling with depression following her divorce, an assertion that seemed contradictory to Mia's actual carefree demeanor post-divorce. Frustrated by my family's reluctance to see Mia's true nature, I told my dad that if they continued to ignore her manipulative behavior, I would have to distance myself from my own well-being. I was exhausted from being a pawn in Mia's games. Despite all the turmoil Mia had caused over the years, from body shaming and bullying to her audacious attempt to seduce my clients, I never anticipated she would go to such lengths to disrupt my life, especially as our wedding plans progressed. The situation reached a tipping point, but eventually my mom called to apologize, shaken by witnessing Mia's distress. According to one of my cousins, Mia had been lamenting my happy life to anyone who would listen, showcasing a mix of envy and regret that was hard to ignore. Mia's envy reached a boiling point as she spread rumors that I didn't deserve my success or my relationship with Mark, insisting that she, being the more attractive sister, was entitled to the best of everything. When I relayed her words to Mom, she paused and then advised me to focus on my upcoming wedding and the joyous life awaiting me with Mark. Fortunately, Mia kept a low profile leading up to the wedding day, allowing us to prepare without her interference. However, on the morning of the wedding, an urgent call from Mark's best friend shattered the peace. He insisted I come to Mark's room immediately, along with my parents. My heart raced as we rushed over, fearing the worst. We found Mark semi-conscious and shirtless, his groomsmen explaining that Mia had tried to sabotage him. As Mark was getting dressed, Mia appeared with a drink. Despite his refusal, she insisted, and he took a sip to avoid a scene, only to realize it was spite. He managed to excuse himself to the restroom and alerted his friend. By the time his friend arrived, Mark was slipping out of consciousness. His quick-thinking friend began recording as he entered the room and captured Mia inappropriately forcing herself on Mark, who was clearly incapacitated in protest. Mia, caught off guard by the friend's arrival, tried to spin the narrative, claiming they were consensually involved. When we arrived and confronted her, still visibly affected by the drug, it was a horrific scene. The drink, with residue still visible, underscored the severity of her actions. My parents were mortified. When Mom confronted Mia, who had hastily reapplied her smudged lipstick, Mia claimed it was mutual and that Mark had initiated. Mom, furious and disgusted by the lie, slapped her and exposed the truth with the video evidence. Realizing her plot had failed, Mia was promptly ejected from the venue by security, instructed not to let her return. The doctor confirmed Mark had been drugged, leading to severe nausea and disorientation, which delayed our ceremony as he recovered. The incident became the scandalous talk among our guests, overshadowing what should have been a day of celebration. When the wedding finally proceeded, Mark amended his vows, affirming his commitment to protect our relationship from any external negativity. After our honeymoon, my parents visited, extending heartfelt apologies to both of us for Mia's behavior, assuring us that she would no longer be a part of our lives. Dad had finally taken the step to ask her to move out and live independently. The whole ordeal left a lasting imprint on me, shaking the foundations of what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. I was grateful for Mark's friend's quick action, without which I might have doubted Mark's loyalty under Mia's deceitful scheme. This incident, though painful, fortified our bond and our resolve to shield our union from any further malice.
Luna recounted a moment that had deeply hurt her. It was just a watch. That's what my husband casually remarked when he handed it over to his sister. She really wanted it, and I didn't think it would be a big deal, he explained with a smirk that didn't reach his cold eyes. It was as if I were invisible to him. A sharp pang of pain erupted in my chest. It felt as if my heart was being squeezed by an immense force. That watch wasn't just any item. It was a precious memento. My father, with shaky hands and tear-filled eyes during his last days, had entrusted it to me. It was originally a gift from my mother to him, a token of her profound love, bought with the savings from countless overtime hours. Yet there my husband stood, diminishing its value without a second thought, crushing my heart underfoot. The atmosphere in our living room turned icy in an instant. The evening sun cast eerie shadows across my husband's indifferent face. Why'd he look so upset? My sister is happy with it, and clearly, she values it more than a useless woman like you would, he jeered, thrusting his smartphone at me to show a photo of his sister wearing the watch, the last link I had to my father. In that moment, the foundations of my home seemed to crack further, yet I knew no one within these walls could possibly grasp my anguish. I bit my lip to stem the flow of tears, my voice trembling as I asked, "Why would you give away something so precious without even asking me?" "Why would I need to ask? It's not like I have to consider your feelings," he retorted with a sigh of irritation. That was the breaking point. After 10 years of tolerating his disregard, I couldn't bear it any longer. Quietly, I stood up, glancing down at the wedding ring that suddenly felt too heavy on my finger. His puzzled look followed me, but he remained oblivious to the internal shift within me. It was as if the very house was witnessing my resolve solidify. My name is Luna, a 27-year-old stay-at-home mom. I live with my husband, Hudson, and our daughter, Hazel, in a seemingly idyllic home with white walls and a blooming garden, praised often by our neighbors for its pristine appearance. Yet, beneath that facade lies a profound emptiness, a void left by my father's passing a few years back. Raised in a unique household, my mom was a dedicated family lawyer who was always buried under a mountain of cases and urgent calls. With her frequently away, it was my dad who was the heart of our home, filling it with warmth and the aroma of delicious meals. His kindness was a balm to my soul, especially against the harshness of my mother's rare criticisms. His gentle spirit had always been my sanctuary, now painfully hollow without his presence. He would draw close and gently whisper, "Don't worry, you're perfect just as you are." His words formed a protective barrier around my heart. Yet a few years ago, I lost my father suddenly, and my world seemed to crumble, losing all its vibrancy. On the day of his funeral, clad in mourning attire, I faced myself in the mirror. That moment struck me with the harsh reality that I would never see my father again. His memory has since become the cornerstone of my strength. My relationship with my mother was always layered and complex. I greatly admired her brilliance in the professional realms of courtrooms and boardrooms. Watching her argue cases with poised confidence always left me in awe. However, at home, her words could often cut deeply. "You need to be more independent, set goals, and work diligently towards them," she would say. Each comment felt like a rejection, widening the gap between us. It wasn't until I got married and became a mother myself that I began to grasp her true intentions. Underneath her stern exterior was a deep desire for me to develop strength and resilience. Despite this understanding, the emotional scars remained, and I vowed to ensure my daughter never felt unloved or unnoticed. After college, I took a stable job at a conventional company, harboring dreams of creating a nurturing, warm family environment. That's where I met Hudson, a colleague whose calm demeanor and kind smile instantly attracted me. After a year of dating, we married and began our life together. When our daughter Hazel was born, I decided to leave my job to devote myself fully to raising her. My father's watch became a poignant symbol of his enduring presence in my life. It was a gift from my mother to my father on one of their anniversaries, symbolizing the strong bond of our family. I wore it only on special occasions like Hazel's first day at school, feeling a rush of memories and emotions each time. On ordinary days, I kept it securely stored, treasuring it as my link to the man who taught me about love. One quiet afternoon, while tidying up and watching over Hazel, I felt compelled to check on the watch. Holding it, feeling its cool metal and seeing its gleam, brought me comfort. Holding it close, I whispered a promise to my father to be as loving and supportive a parent to Hazel as he was to me. Despite the contentment I found in daily life, subtle strains began to appear in my marriage to Hudson. His overly protective behavior towards his younger sister Eleanor, who lived with their parents and flitted between jobs, became increasingly concerning. Hudson, who had been an only child for the first 10 years of his life, seemed to struggle with his parents' shifted focus after Eleanor's birth. Instead of harboring resentment, he became overly attentive and protective of her. This dynamic became a point of contention when we were planning our future home, as Hudson insisted on living near his parents' house, a decision on which he was unwilling to compromise. I didn't have a strong preference about where we should live, so I went along with it when Hudson and his parents suggested a location close to them. They even contributed financially to our new house, which was conveniently located just 9 minutes away from his parents' house. After settling in, Hudson started visiting his family almost every day, stopping by to chat with his sister Eleanor on his way home from work. Initially, it seemed harmless and didn't interfere with our daily lives, but gradually, it started to bother me. One evening, I cautiously brought up my concerns, asking Hudson if he thought he was visiting his parents too often. He simply laughed it off, saying he couldn't resist seeing his little sister Eleanor. His casual dismissal stung, and I felt a pang of realization that Eleanor, not I or our daughter Hazel, was his priority. Before we were married, I noticed his close bond with Eleanor, but dismissed it as typical sibling closeness. However, Living together, my unease grew into a profound discomfort. Thoughts of divorce flickered through my mind, and I even collected divorce papers once. But for Hazel's sake and due to financial worries, I hesitated. Meanwhile, Eleanor's subtle hostility added to my distress. During visits, her smile never reached her eyes, especially when Hudson showed affection towards Hazel or engaged in conversation with me. At one family dinner, a disturbing incident occurred that I could never shake off. While Hudson entertained Hazel, I was helping in the kitchen when Eleanor knelt beside Hazel and whispered something hurtful, implying Hazel was only in the family because Eleanor had advised her father to marry. I caught the tail end of the conversation, seeing Hazel's bewildered and saddened face. My heart ached as I rushed to comfort her, avoiding making a scene for her sake. From that day, my wariness towards Eleanor solidified into certain distrust. Her manipulations seemed more frequent, and Hudson's unwavering defense of her actions only escalated my frustration. He would dismiss my concerns, insisting Eleanor meant no harm, leaving me feeling isolated and unheard. Despite this, I focused on keeping life as normal as possible for Hazel, striving to create joyful memories and protect her from any negativity. The situation reached a critical point when we prepared for a family outing hosted by Hudson's workplace. It was a rare opportunity to enjoy a relaxed day together away from the ongoing tension at home. As I helped Hazel get ready, I hoped this would give us a chance to mend some of the fractures in our family dynamics. Her dress shimmered, reflecting her sheer joy, making it impossible not to smile. "Mom, will I look like a princess?" she asked eagerly. "Absolutely, my love. You'll be the most radiant princess there," I assured her, her eyes twinkling with happiness. As the day unfolded, I decided to wear my father's watch, a precious keepsake, to feel his presence during such special moments. However, when I reached for it, it was missing. Panic surged through me as I searched every nook, but it remained lost. My desperation grew as I tore through the room, only to come up empty-handed. I turned to Hudson in a frantic state. "Hudson, have you seen my father's watch?" He barely glanced up from his phone, his casual response striking me hard. "Oh, that?" I gave it to Eleanor. She liked it and said it matched her style. "You weren't using it anyway." His words and nonchalant tone were a blow. "That watch wasn't yours to give away. Do you understand its significance to me?" His reply was dismissive. "Relax, it's just a watch. Eleanor will take good care of it." His indifference was the last straw. After enduring years of his casual disregard and favoritism towards Eleanor, tears welled up as I clenched my fists. Hazel, sensing my distress, came over and held my hand tenderly. "Mom, are you okay?" I knelt and hugged her, her presence soothing my turmoil. "Yes, sweetie, everything will be all right," I reassured her, though I knew deep down that things were far from fine. That night, as I lay awake, a decision crystallized in my mind. By morning, I approached Hudson with a firm resolve. "Hudson, I want a divorce." He was stunned, not anticipating my resolve. "Are you serious?" I nodded without hesitation. "I've had enough. I can't live like this anymore. Hazel and I deserve better." He scoffed, trying to undermine my decision. "You can't survive without me. You're just a housewife." But Hazel's voice pierced the tension. "Mom can do anything. She doesn't need you." Her words bolstered my resolve. "She's right. We'll manage." I handed him the divorce papers. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. As he signed, he muttered, "Don't come crying back to me when you regret this." "I won't. Trust me," I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. With Hazel by my side, we left for my mother's house, where we were greeted with open arms. "Of course, you can stay as long as you need. This is your home too." My mother embraced us, her support healing my frayed nerves. Hazel's laughter soon filled the quiet house. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe and belonged. In the days that followed, with my mother's encouragement, I started to rebuild my life, navigating the challenges of re-entering the workforce after years away. Despite my initial trepidation, I secured a position as an office assistant at a law firm, thanks to my mother's former connections at the same firm where she had retired. My first day on the job was fraught with nerves, yet the staff's warm reception eased my anxiety. Over time, I established a balance between my new role and motherhood. My daughter, Hazel, flourished under the watchful care of her grandmother, quickly adapting to our new routine. However, an unexpected encounter one lunch break shifted everything. As I entered the firm's lounge, a familiar voice halted me in my tracks. "Oh, look who it is." "Hello, Luna." It was Eleanor, standing there with her typical self-assured grin, impeccably dressed, designer bag in tow. My heart sank as she approached with a handshake. "Guess what? I just joined the team here. Isn't that wonderful?" Her mocking tone clashed sharply with the chilly look in her eyes. "Why are you here, Eleanor?" "Don't worry. I'm just here to work. Nothing personal." Yet, the intensity of her stare suggested otherwise. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor's presence grew increasingly problematic. She charmed my colleagues with ease, quickly becoming a focal point in the office. Meanwhile, she started to undermine me, initially through subtle remarks about my employment being a product of nepotism, which soon escalated into whispers of incompetence and fictitious blunders. One afternoon, overhearing her paint me as a struggling employee to a co-worker was the last straw. "Poor Luna. It must be tough managing work and personal issues," she said, her feigned concern laced with venom. That evening, I confided in my mother. "Mom, I don't know what to do. She's trying to ruin me. You need to document everything, Luna. Don't let her intimidate you." Taking her advice, I meticulously recorded Eleanor's maneuvers and kept audio recordings of our interactions. The breaking point came when a coworker confidentially warned me about Eleanor's insinuations of unethical behavior in my past job. Realizing the extent of her malice, I gathered my evidence and confronted her. During a lunch break, I summoned her to an empty conference room. "Eleanor, we need to talk." "About what, dears?" Her feigned innocence only strengthened my resolve. "I know what you've been doing, and I have proof." I laid my phone on the table and played the recordings. Her confident facade wavered as her own voice filled the room. "You can't prove anything." "I think management might disagree," I countered, seeing a flash of fear in her eyes. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone edged with defeat. "I want you to stop the nonsense. No more lies, no more rumors. And if you can't, I'll take this to HR." Her jaw clenched, fists tightened. "You wouldn't dare. Try me." I held my ground, unyielding in the face of intimidation. After a moment of intense silence, she scoffed and stormed out. Later that evening, I discussed the incident with my mother. Though she seemed to relent, I remained wary, suspecting she was merely waiting for another opportunity. "It's time we escalate this," I decided, and my mother agreed to help me prepare a formal complaint to Human Resources. Over the following days, we gathered substantial proof. Emails, voice recordings, and supportive statements from colleagues, assembling a strong case. When I submitted the complaint, HR acted swiftly. They called Eleanor into a meeting and presented our evidence. Shortly thereafter, she was suspended pending a thorough investigation. Word of this spread quickly around the office, bringing me a deep sense of relief for the first time in weeks. That night, my mother, my daughter Hazel, and I celebrated over a quiet dinner. Hazel's bright smile as she noticed my joy was a poignant reminder of what truly mattered. 5 weeks later, HR concluded their investigation. Eleanor was dismissed for her misconduct, leaving the firm in disgrace despite her attempts to garner sympathy with a contrived story. Her departure marked a clear turning point. The office atmosphere improved significantly, and my colleagues began to express their support more openly. "We're glad you stood your ground, Luna. You didn't deserve any of that," they said, and their words meant the world to me. As the dust settled, I took time to reflect on everything I had endured. The challenges were formidable, but they had fortified me. With my mother and Hazel's unwavering support, I felt more resilient than ever. Determined to forge a positive path forward, I was committed to creating a better future for Hazel and myself. Together, we were unstoppable. I only learned much later about the precarious circumstances surrounding my birth. My mom once confided in me that when she discovered she was pregnant with me, there was real worry about whether they could manage the financial burden of raising a child. At that time, my dad was earning very little and they were just scraping by. However, everything changed when my grandparents learned about the pregnancy. Far from being concerned, they were ecstatic. They generously offered my parents their own house, a lovely place in a desirable neighborhood, close to an excellent school. They also pledged ongoing financial support. Born into that warm, welcoming house, my early years were filled with joy. My grandparents were a constant presence in my life, taking on daily duties like dropping me off and picking me up from school, and treating me to after-school ice cream or park visits. Those early days were some of the happiest of my life. However, a stark shift occurred one night that is etched permanently in my memory. I was supposed to be asleep, but I was jolted awake by the sound of my parents shouting. I couldn't grasp all the words, but phrases like betrayal and how could you reached my ears. The climax of the fight was marked by the slamming of the front door. Peering out my window, I saw my dad stumbling towards his car, a whiskey bottle in hand. The sound of screeching tires was the last I heard from him. The following morning, the grim news of his fatal car accident was delivered by 4 police officers at our doorstep, which left my mother devastated. The funeral is a blur in my memory, dominated by the sight of my father in a coffin and the pervasive sound of crying. My grandparents' faces, wet with tears as they held me close, are a vivid memory from that day. Life changed rapidly after that. My mom seemed to recover startlingly quickly, and within a few months, she had remarried and was expecting another child. She told me excitedly that I was going to have a little sister named Eliana. While she was thrilled, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Everything was changing too quickly, and I deeply missed my dad and my grandparents. As time passed, visits from my grandparents dwindled until they stopped altogether. Confused and missing them, I asked my mom why they no longer visited. Her expression hardened as she told me they had cut ties with us because she had started a new family. But she softened as she reminded me that we still had the house and their financial help for my education, something we should be grateful for. My sister Eliana was born prematurely, and though Mom explained it as just one of those things, even as a young child, I sensed there was more to the story. Meanwhile, my new stepfather, Daniel, made no secret of his disdain for me, often glaring at me across the dinner table. Life had shifted from a tale of joy and support to one of complexity and silent battles at home, marking a profound shift from the idyllic early days with my grandparents. Growing up, my father was a difficult man with a short temper, and our interactions were often strained. At dinner, when he'd snap irritably, "I'm trying to eat in peace," my mother would hastily intervene, suggesting gently, "Eliana, sweetheart, why don't you take your meal to your room? I'll bring it to you there." Over time, these episodes increased, signaling that even the smallest things could provoke him, and sadly, I was often the target. Whenever we were alone, he'd belittle me with harsh words, his face contorted with disdain as he labeled me a freeloader and a burden. These encounters always left me silently holding back tears, feeling powerless. My father's demeanor starkly contrasted when it came to my sister. He was always cheerful and doting towards her. He would playfully lift her onto his knee, spoil her with presents, and speak in a sweet tone that always seemed to unsettle me. His pet name for her, my little angel, accompanied by promises of surprises, only emphasized the disparity in how he treated us. In her desperation to keep the peace and placate him, my mother found ways to keep me out of sight. She would usher me to my room, locking the door behind her whenever he arrived home. Isolated, I listened to the distant sounds of laughter and chatter, feeling excluded from what should have been my family circle. I couldn't comprehend why I was relegated to eating alone, or why I felt like an outsider in my own home. As I grew older, the isolation only deepened. I was excluded from family vacations and gatherings at relatives' homes. Even when guests visited, I was instructed to remain in my room, silent and out of sight to avoid any disruption. My mother, her eyes filled with a pleading look, would remind me, "We don't want to upset him. You know how he gets. And I did know all too well the angry outbursts and the turmoil that followed his temper. With each passing year, I retreated further into myself, becoming shy and withdrawn. School became a quiet sanctuary where I barely interacted with others. However, in the solitude of my room, my imagination became my refuge. I crafted elaborate stories and grand adventures where I was the hero, cherished and celebrated. On my 18th birthday, an unexpected opportunity changed my life. Having honed my skills on the internet, I discovered an online editorial director seeking new voices in children's and young adult literature. On a whim, I submitted some of my stories and, to my astonishment, they were a hit. Suddenly, I was collaborating on projects, writing stories, and even helping develop educational apps for young people. For the first time, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. My work was not only recognized, but loved. I was making my own money and saving every penny. Through my writing, I found a sense of belonging and purpose, a stark contrast to the invisibility I felt at home. My stories, once a private escape, had opened the door to a new, empowering chapter of my life. Watching my bank account grow was thrilling in a way I had never experienced. One day, feeling particularly courageous after a large deposit, I decided to share the news of my financial success with my mother. We were alone in the kitchen. My stepfather Daniel was away on a flatbed driver job, and my sister was out visiting a friend. "Mom," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "I have something to tell you. I've been working with a publishing house writing stories, and I'm actually making quite good money now." Mom's eyes lit up. "Really? Oh, Eliana, that's wonderful. I always knew you were a smart girl," she said. Her rare praise warmed my heart, but then her face took on a calculating look. She leaned in closer, her tone shifting. "This is actually perfect timing. We've been facing some financial troubles lately." My heart sank as she continued. "This house is so big, and upkeep isn't cheap. Plus, raising you hasn't been cheap either. We've been exhausted trying to provide for you all these years." I felt as if I'd been punched. I had always felt more like an outsider than a family member. How could I have been such a burden? "Remember that college fund we set up for you?" she continued, avoiding my gaze. "Well, we had to dip into that for the house. But now that you're earning, you can support yourself, right?" I nodded, too shocked to speak. "That's my girl," she said, patting my hand. "Oh, and one more thing. Daniel and I think it's time for you to move out after you graduate. We're turning your room into a space for your sister. She needs more room." I stared at her in disbelief. "Move out? But where will I go?" Mom shrugged dismissively and turned away. "You're a smart girl, Eliana. You'll figure it out. You've got some savings now, right?" See, as she left the kitchen, the magnitude of her words crashed over me. I was being ousted from my home. The funds I thought would pay for college were gone, and it seemed my own mother was indifferent to my fate. The months until graduation passed in a haze of anxiety and frantic planning. By day, I focused on finishing high school with strong grades. By night, I poured myself into my writing, scrimping and saving every dime. Yet no matter how I adjusted my budgets, the costs for college, tuition, living expenses, books, were overwhelming. I attempted once more to discuss college with my mother, hoping for some understanding. "Mom, I've been looking at college costs, and She cut me off. "Eliana, we've already discussed this. You're on your own now. You'll figure it out." Graduation day came and went without the sense of pride I should have felt. The following morning, my mother appeared at my door with a couple of cardboard boxes, her tone eerily cheerful. "Time to pack up, Eliana," she announced. "Your sister needs the space." As I packed, the realization that I was truly on my own sank in. My dreams of further education seemed more distant than ever, and I knew that from now on, it was up to me to shape my future. Overflowing with excitement about her new room, I packed my belongings into boxes, trying to hold back tears as I finished. When everything was ready, my mom assisted me in moving them to the front door. Standing on the porch, surrounded by my few possessions, my mom gave me a brief, awkward hug. "Good luck out there," she said before the door shut behind her. I lingered for a moment, stunned, then took a deep breath, picked up my boxes, and walked away from the only home I'd ever known. With my limited funds, I managed to secure a small studio apartment in a less desirable part of town. The frequent sirens were disruptive at night, but the space was mine. Deciding to delay college for a year due to financial constraints, I focused on finding work. I reached out to my contacts at a publishing house, pleading for any available work. To my relief, they were eager to offer me more opportunities. "We've been impressed with your work, Eliana," my freelance editor said. "How would you feel about writing some children's books for us?" I embraced the chance eagerly. Soon, I was immersed in writing and illustrating, working tirelessly. The job was challenging but fulfilling, and for the first time, I felt a sense of purpose. Living alone was tough, but I adapted, learning to manage my finances, cook simple meals, and navigate public transport. I also made some friends in my building, other young people striving for independence. However, despite my efforts, saving for college seemed like a far-off goal, with every small financial gain offset by unexpected expenses like apartment repairs, tech malfunctions, or health issues. A year after leaving, I received an unexpected call from a number I thought I'd never see again, my mother's. Her voice was unusually cheerful. "Eliana, sweetie, how are you? I've missed you so much. Why don't you come visit us this weekend?" Skeptical but curious, I agreed to the visit, packing with a mix of hope and apprehension. Upon arrival, my mom's exaggerated affection felt forced, as if she were a poor actress in a play. "Oh, Eliana," she exclaimed, "you must be exhausted from your journey. Why don't you sleep in your sister's room tonight? She can stay in the guest room." My sister, now a teenager, rolled her eyes but didn't object. The next morning, the sound of familiar voices drew me downstairs to the kitchen, where I froze in the doorway. There at the table sat my grandparents, whom I hadn't seen in years. "Eliana, oh look how you've grown," my grandmother exclaimed with joy. As they shared their plans to move to a nursing home, my grandfather's voice trembled with emotion. They wanted to connect and share some time with us before they left, a sentiment that made the room feel warmer, bridging the distance the years had imposed. "You're really thriving, aren't you?" Grandma interjected, her voice eager. "Do tell us all about your university. What's your major, dear?" I hesitated, unsure of how to respond, when my mother quickly filled the silence. "Eliana is excelling at school. She's at the top of her class, as always," she announced with a smile. I was taken aback by how naturally the falsehoods rolled off her tongue. My grandparents beamed with pride, though their curious gazes suggested they had more questions. "That's fantastic," Grandma exclaimed. "Could we perhaps speak with Eliana alone for a while? We'd love to catch up." A flicker of panic crossed my mother's face. "Oh, I don't think that's necessary. Eliana's quite busy, aren't you, dear? In fact, we should probably start wrapping this visit up," she added hastily, diverting the conversation to other matters and hardly giving me a chance to speak. As the visit concluded, Grandma discreetly squeezed my arm and slipped me a business card. Once they were gone, my mother's demeanor shifted instantly, her warm smile replaced by a stark, indifferent look that I knew all too well. "Well, that's over," she remarked as she began to clear the table briskly. "You should probably head home now, Eliana. I'm sure you have things to do." Standing in the doorway, the business card felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket as my mother ushered me out. The warmth and affection from moments before were replaced by the familiar chill of detachment. Back in my modest apartment, I finally pulled out the business card with trembling fingers and dialed the number, my heart thumping. "Hello," came my grandmother's warm, familiar voice. "Grandma, it's Eliana," I whispered, barely holding back my emotions. We talked for a long time, her voice a comforting blend of joy and concern. Before long, we had arranged for her and Grandpa to visit me at my place the next day. Excited yet anxious, I gave them my address and then threw myself into preparing my apartment. I cleaned every nook and cranny, organized my few possessions, and even found a vase for some fresh flowers I picked up from the local store. Sleep eluded me that night as I busied myself in the small kitchen, preparing lunch for the following day and baking Grandma's favorite snickerdoodle cookies from a recipe I found online. Morning arrived too quickly. I was just pulling the last batch of cookies from the oven when I heard a knock. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed down my shirt and opened the door. There stood Grandma and Grandpa, a mix of emotions crossing their faces. After a moment of silent reunion, Grandma stepped forward and hugged me tightly. "Oh, Eliana," she whispered emotionally. "Look at you, all grown up." As I welcomed them into my small apartment, their eyes widened slightly as they took in the modest space, but their smiles told me they were just happy to be here with me. Grandpa spoke slowly, his face filled with confusion. "Eliana, why are you here? Your mother told us you were still living in the old house." Before I could clarify, they began to unravel a story that would completely alter my understanding of my past. "We've always wanted to be a part of your life," Grandma said, tears welling up in her eyes. "But your mother, she kept us apart." They revealed the tragic evening my father died, exposing secrets that shook me. My mother had been unfaithful and was already expecting my sister when my father discovered the betrayal. Heartbroken, he had decided on a divorce, but then a fatal accident claimed his life. As I absorbed their words, they explained that the home I had grown up in, where Mom and her new partner, Daniel, still resided, legally belonged to me, bequeathed in my father's will. "We've sent money for your upbringing every month," Grandma disclosed as she took my hand. "When you graduated, we even increased the amount, thinking you needed it for college." The revelations spun around me. All my struggles to make ends meet, yet there had been funds and a property in my name all along. "We just wanted to ensure you were comfortable and everything at the house was fine," Grandpa added, explaining their unexpected visit the day before. Overwhelmed, I confronted a flurry of emotions, anger, betrayal, and sorrow for the lost joys of my childhood. "I don't understand," I faltered. "All this time, there was money, a house in my name." Grandma tightened her grip on my hand. "Tell us everything, Eliana. We need to know what really happened." So I poured out my story. I spoke of a lonely childhood, confined and hidden away, and of Daniel's hostility that made me feel like an unwelcome burden. I revealed how the funds meant for my education had been seized, how I was expelled from the home with little more than a few boxes of personal items. "I've been scraping by," I confessed, my voice cracking, "writing children's books from this tiny apartment, saving pennies for college." As my tale unfolded, shock turned to fury on my grandparents' faces. Grandpa's complexion reddened, his fists balled in anger. "This is unacceptable," he seethed. "What your mother has done, it's theft, it's abuse. We're going to make this right, Eliana. I promise you that." True to their promise, my grandparents wasted no time. They retained a top lawyer, and together we embarked on a legal battle to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The courtroom drama was intense. Mom and Daniel painted me as a wayward, ungrateful child, but the overwhelming evidence, bank records and testimonies from neighbors about my seclusion, swayed the judge. Justice ruled in my favor. Mom and Daniel were evicted from my property, and the court ordered that the misappropriated maintenance funds be repaid to me in full. Leaving the courthouse, I felt a bittersweet mix of vindication and sorrow. Yes, I had won, but at the cost of severing ties with the only family I had known, as dysfunctional as it had been. Yet a new chapter was beginning. Grandma and Grandpa were committed to rectifying the years we lost. They helped me move into my rightful home and supported me as I selected a college nearby the nursing home where they planned to move. Being close to them felt right after everything that had transpired. For the first time in a long while, life seemed almost perfect. Growing up, I often visited my grandparents, basking in their love and wisdom. We spent countless hours playing chess, watching classic films, and engaging in deep conversations. They shared stories about my father, helping to piece together the scattered fragments of my own history. However, I was learning that life could be simultaneously generous and ruthless. Just when I was starting to settle into this newfound joy with my grandparents, tragedy struck. My grandfather passed away suddenly from a heart attack, and my grandmother followed him just 3 months later. The doctors claimed it was natural causes, but I knew the heartbreaking truth. She had lost her will to live without him. Once again, I found myself alone, engulfed in grief. Having only just reconnected with them, I was just beginning to heal the wounds of my past. With their loss, I immersed myself in my studies, trying to find solace in academia, but the void was palpable every holiday and milestone I couldn't share with them. As years passed, life found a new rhythm. I graduated from college with honors and landed a prestigious job at a publishing house, the very one that had given me my first break as a teenager. With the inheritance from my grandparents, I bought a cozy apartment near my workplace, a place I could truly call my own. My financial situation improved significantly. I rented out my grandparents' house and my childhood home, which provided a steady income stream. For the first time, I felt secure, stable, and, most importantly, happy. I had a circle of friends, a fulfilling career, and a peace I had never known before. However, life always has its surprises. One Sunday afternoon, an unfamiliar number appeared on my phone, but I immediately recognized it. It was my mother's. With a mix of curiosity and apprehension, I answered. Her voice was unnaturally sweet, oozing with feigned affection. She quickly delved into a sob story about my pregnant sister, who had been abandoned by her husband. They were all crammed into a tiny apartment. My mother, her boyfriend Daniel, and my sister. They were desperate. My mother alternated between begging and crying, employing her old manipulative tactics. As she spoke, painful memories resurfaced. The lonely nights locked in my room, the years of neglect and emotional abuse, the day she kicked me out with nothing but a few boxes. She pleaded for help, claiming we were family. I responded coldly, questioning her notion of family, reminding her of her past actions. She tried to argue that it was all in the past, but I countered that the effects were present and real. She was only reaching out because she needed something as always. I advised her to resolve her own problems, echoing the harsh advice she gave me when she abandoned me. I firmly wished her luck, echoing her own dismissive words from years ago, and hung up. As I blocked her number, a tremor ran through my hand, but a sense of liberation followed. For years, I had carried the burden of her neglect. I am Ellie, and by all accounts, I was born into a life of privilege, though I didn't recognize it initially. Growing up in an affluent family, you tend to assume everyone's reality mirrors your own. My family ran the most successful chain of pharmacies in the state, called Ellie Pharmaceuticals, a venture that wasn't just a business, but a treasured legacy crafted by my grandfather and later inherited by my father, William. My childhood home was a Grand Victorian, where my father would return from work each day, his designer ties slightly loosened, and launch into discussions about profit margins before he even greeted us. At dinner, he'd proudly share news of yet another record-breaking quarter, while my mother would listen intently, her pearls glinting in the soft light, showing her approval. "This is what I'll hand down to you someday," he'd say. My older brother Mason, however, would simply play with his food, seemingly uninterested. At 14, while I was still preoccupied with dolls, Mason was already fascinated with ancient civilizations rather than fiscal reports. He'd attempt to steer the conversation toward his latest archaeological find from our backyard, only to be dismissed by our father. I, on the other hand, was the quintessential daddy's girl, drawn to the family business from a young age. By the age of 16, I knew every regular customer by name and could list our stock as effortlessly as reciting the alphabet. My father beamed with pride when I discussed assisting elderly customers or when I proposed new product displays that boosted sales. "Business runs in her veins," he'd proudly claim. As Mason delved deeper into history books and archaeological journals, my father began involving me in the business side of things. By 18, I was familiar with inventory checks and basic accounting. "Watch and learn, Ellie," he would say as he taught me contract negotiations. "This will all be yours one day." My mother was equally pleased, gifting me elegant business suits for my birthdays. while Mason received inexpensive history books. The decisive moment came when Mason declared his intention to pursue archaeology in college. We were seated in our opulent dining room, under a chandelier that cost more than a luxury car, when he broke the news. "You're what?" My father exploded, disbelief and disapproval crashing down like his fork against the fine china. "No son of mine will waste his life digging in the dirt." "William, please," my mother intervened, though her expression revealed her silent agreement. "It's what I love, Dad," Mason responded, calm yet resolute. "I've been accepted to the program, and Grayson believes I have real potential." "Potential to be poor," my father retorted, emphasizing our identity as business people, not dirt scholars. Mason's resolve hardened, his determination clear. "Then I guess I'm not a business person," he declared, rising from his seat. That night, the family dynamics shifted irrevocably. I was no longer simply an alternative. I became the focal point of my father's aspirations, the sole heir apparent to Ellie Pharmaceuticals. The expectations placed on me were enormous, transforming my role within the family and shaping my future in ways I never anticipated. I truly believed I loved it, that I was destined to be there. Medical college was my dream come true, renowned for its elite status, fiercely competitive nature, and, unsurprisingly, its wealthy student body. There, amidst the opulence of designer fashion and limitless spending, I found my niche. It was in the campus library, of all places, where I met Joseph. I was wrestling with a coding assignment, muttering frustrations at my laptop, when he appeared beside me. "Need some help?" he offered, settling into the adjacent chair. His warm, brown eyes and soft accent, the origins of which I couldn't pinpoint, intrigued me from the start. Joseph was a prodigy in computer science, having earned a full scholarship. His academic brilliance was acknowledged campus-wide. Grayson showcased his work as exemplary, and peers vied for his presence in group projects. Despite his acclaim, he carried himself with unassuming grace. After several study sessions over coffee, I finally asked about his past. He shared, with straightforward ease, that his parents had emigrated from Syria during his early childhood. His father worked as a security officer and his mother as a she-cooks in a restaurant. Joseph had been programming since age 10, learning on a used laptop, even taking web developer jobs to support family expenses. Unlike him, I had never known the weight of financial responsibility. His resilience, devoid of any self-pity, only deepened my respect and admiration. A month into our acquaintance, we started dating. Joseph was different from the affluent circles I had always known. He exhibited genuine courtesy, a stark contrast to the rehearsed politeness I was accustomed to. Our dates were at quaint, family-run eateries where the food was delightful and the proprietors greeted him by name. 3 months into our relationship, he proposed during a sunset stroll on campus, not with a lavish diamond, but with a simple silver band he had saved for. It was understated, sincere, perfect. My father, initially overjoyed about my engagement, hastily arranged a grand dinner to introduce Joseph to the extended family, likely imagining him as an heir to some corporate empire. However, the moment we entered the dining room, I sensed a shift. The initial smiles from my relatives soon morphed into thinly veiled disdain. My aunt audibly gasped, clutching her pearls, while my mother's glass of champagne halted midair. The room fell silent until my father's voice broke the stillness, his tone patronizing as he addressed Joseph, asking him to elaborate on his background. Joseph, maintaining his composure amidst the palpable hostility, answered with dignity. I admired his poise as he navigated the uncomfortable scrutiny, his hand gripping mine under the table. In that moment, the contrast between my world and his couldn't have been starker, yet my decision to stand by him felt more certain than ever. In a calm and steady voice, Zay addressed the room. "Sir, my family moved here from Syria when I was only 8 years old. We've made this our home ever since." He spoke with a quiet respect, while the ornate chandelier overhead cast sharp shadows across his father's features, giving him a somewhat daunting appearance. My father works as a security officer at Atlantic Corp, and my mother is a she cooks in a restaurant, he continued, his pride intact despite the simplicity of their jobs. I started working part-time as soon as I was old enough to contribute to our family's income. Fortunately, I was able to secure a full scholarship to Preston. The revelation made my mother nearly choke on her wine in surprise, prompting her to gulp down water as her pearls quivered with each swallow. Around the table, Aunt Avery and Uncle shared knowing glances, and Cousin Elena couldn't hide a smirk behind her perfectly poised hand. My father's face turned a deeper shade of red, a prominent vein throbbing on his forehead, a telltale sign of his rising anger. As he pushed his dinner plate away forcefully, causing the fine china to clink loudly, he challenged Zay. My daughter Ellie has always lived a certain way, never lacking anything. How do you plan to provide for her? Before I could intervene, Zay replied with a calm that contrasted sharply with my father's temper. I've been successfully trading in the investing content editor market, Mr. Ellie, and I'm also laying the groundwork for my own tech startup. Digital asset trader, my father scoffed, his laugh bouncing off the rich mahogany paneling, reminiscent of a painful memory of a family member duped by a scam. You mean like the scheme that swindled Aunt Martha out of her savings? Dad, it's not the same, I protested, my pulse racing, but Zay, well-versed in blockchain technology and recognized as a speaker at tech conferences, tried to reassure him. Enough. My father's voice boomed as he slammed his hand on the table, causing the crystal to rattle and the silverware to jump. The room flinched, but Zay remained composed. I know a con when I see one. Your Aunt Martha thought she knew better, too, my father growled, not hiding his disdain. Dad, please, I pleaded as he stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the hardwood, towering over us with a fury that chilled me. You don't understand our values, our way of life. You're not one of us, he declared, his words cutting through the tense air. I watched, heartbroken, as my father, a man who taught me the importance of ethics and integrity, revealed a side of himself driven by prejudice and rage. The rest of the family seemed to silently agree with him, nodding as though his words were merely stating the obvious. His finger pointed accusingly at Zay, his face twisted in anger. I see right through you. Zay maintained his composure, trying to address my father's concerns, yet the divide had already been drawn, marking a moment that would redefine how I saw my family and their supposed values. At the family dinner, tensions were high as accusations flew toward Joseph. Labeled a gold digger by William, who believed Joseph was only after my daughter's inheritance, the conversation took an unpleasant turn. My mother intervened, not in Joseph's defense, but to remind me of my youth and the family's expectations that I should focus on my education and career first, suggesting marriage could wait until I found a more suitable partner. Uncle chimed in, suspecting Joseph's interest in our family's pharmacy chain, drawing parallels to a past suitor who had ulterior motives. Patricia, joining the fray, dismissed Joseph's intentions as manipulative. Throughout this, Joseph remained composed, yet I noticed the slight tension in his expression and the firm grip on his glass that betrayed his calm exterior. My father scornfully questioned the future Joseph could offer, mocking his aspirations and our possible life together. Overwhelmed by the unjust and prejudiced barrage, I stood up abruptly, my chair crashing down, and demanded they stop. I declared my disappointment in their narrow-mindedness and snobbery. Grabbing Joseph's hand, I announced our departure. As we walked out, my father's threatening words echoed in the foyer, warning of regret and reminding me of my so-called obligations due to their investments in my education. I turned back one last time, asserting that the only thing I owed was to exit respectfully rather than expressing my true feelings. Ignoring further shouts about debts and obligations, Joseph and I left. A year later, we both graduated college. He topped his class in computer science, and I earned my business degree. We moved into a simple apartment, and contrary to my family's grim predictions, we found happiness. When Joseph proposed that summer, I eagerly agreed. I crafted a beautiful wedding announcement on social media, sharing our engagement photo and a message about love overcoming boundaries. The backlash was immediate, with family members voicing their disapproval and refusal to attend what they called a disgrace. Despite the hurtful comments, I focused on the support and love that surrounded us, realizing some relationships, like debts, aren't worth maintaining when they cost too much to bear. After enduring years of waiting for my family's acceptance, I reached my breaking point during an intense phone call with my mother. Her harsh words, declaring I was making the biggest mistake of my life, echoed in my mind as she adamantly stated her refusal to attend my wedding. That night, tears blurred my vision while Zay comforted me, suggesting we could delay our plans to give my family more time. But I was tired of waiting. I resolved that we would proceed with or without their blessing. Unexpectedly, 5 days before our ceremony, my brother Mason arrived from an archaeological excavation in Egypt, where he had been uncovering a new tomb. Despite the layers of desert dust coating him, his presence was a joyful surprise. His warm embrace reassured me, and his promise to walk me down the aisle lifted my spirits. Our wedding was a quaint affair set in a lush garden adorned with twinkling fairy lights. Zay's relatives filled one side of the aisle, their faces beaming with genuine affection, having welcomed me into their family from the start. My side, however, was noticeably sparse. Only Mason and a few brave cousins attended, defying the family's boycott. As time passed, Zay's career in technology flourished, and I launched a successful clothing store. Together, we were building a new life, independent of my family's wealth. Then, an unexpected invitation arrived, a request for a presence at my father William Ellie's 65th birthday. Holding the card, a mix of hope and anxiety stirred within me. Zay, sensing my turmoil, reassured me that he would support whatever decision I made. On the night of the party, we dressed meticulously. I chose a rare first edition of my father's favorite business book as a gift, hoping it would bridge the gap between us. As we entered the room, a hush fell over the crowd, the tension palpable. Despite the chilly reception, I walked forward and presented the gift to my father, who dismissively tossed it aside, undermining the sentiment behind it. The dinner unfolded like a theatrical display of malice. Relatives took turns belittling Zay with snide remarks about his job, his attire, and his unfamiliarity with the nuances of high society. Aunt Avery mockingly questioned his knowledge of dinner etiquette, and my mother slyly commented on his simple suit. Through it all, Zay remained dignified, his composure unshaken despite their attempts to diminish him. Throughout the evening, the stark contrast between the warmth of Zay's family and the cold disdain of my own became ever clearer. It reinforced my conviction that building our life together, on our terms, was the right choice. Even in the face of such adversity, we knew we would face it united, reinforcing the strength of our bond against any challenge. He achieved great success in life, coming from humble beginnings to earn every ounce of respect in the technology industry. Despite his achievements, he often faced those who underestimated him simply because his success was self-made, not inherited. This came to a head during a particularly tense family gathering. My father, with a grand gesture, raised his glass and announced loudly to everyone at the table, effectively silencing them. He mused about what would become of his daughter marrying beneath her station. He asked me directly, with a tone dripping with disdain, if I missed the extravagant life of credit cards and shopping sprees, or if my husband had managed to sustain our lifestyle with the modest earnings from his little computer games. At that moment, something inside me broke. I stood up so abruptly that my chair clattered to the floor. Trembling with anger, I confronted them. "How dare you?" I challenged, staring down at the array of expensive clothes and opulent surroundings. I accused them of being petty and cruel, people who had never truly earned anything on their own. The room fell into an intense silence. I pointed out their obsession with wealth and their neglect of basic humanity. My father's face turned a deep shade of purple as he stood to face me, enraged by my words. He declared his disappointment in my choices and my defense of my husband, whom he dismissed as a fortune hunter. His voice rose even higher as he disinherited me on the spot, announcing to the family that I was no longer his daughter. With a dramatic wave, He introduced my cousin Andrew as his new heir, someone he claimed understood the value of family traditions and maintaining standards. The room burst into applause as Andrew accepted the mantle, thanking our uncle. I looked around at the faces of those I had once considered family, my mother clapping, my cousin smirking, and my aunts and uncles nodding at what they saw as my just desserts. I knew then what I had to do. Taking my husband Joseph's hand, I declared that we were done with this charade, for good. In the years that followed, Joseph's investments in digital asset trader and his launch of a tech company specializing in innovative AI solutions proved wildly successful. Within 1 year, his company, Tech Vision Enterprises, was valued at over $710 million. The same internet money my father had mocked now formed the backbone of a thriving empire. As my husband's name began to appear in business magazines and tech journals, earning titles like 47 Under 47 Most Innovative CEO and Tech Visionary of the Year, my pride in him only grew. Despite his success, he remained the humble man I loved, always remembering his employees' names, opening doors for others, and choosing simplicity over extravagance. This journey reinforced a powerful lesson. True worth comes not from wealth, but from how one chooses to live and treat others. After making their fortune, they now enjoyed a life of tasteful luxury instead of struggling with financial hardships. Eager to prove his father wrong about his life choices, he longed to share his successes with him, despite their strained relationship that had remained tense since a failed birthday dinner. The silence between them had become a peaceful norm. Then, an invitation arrived that shook things up. It was to Elena Ellie's wedding, the cousin who had once ridiculed his partner Joseph's manners and fashion sense. He showed the elegant, cream-colored invitation to Joseph that evening, whose compassionate response reflected his deep-seated belief in the importance of family, despite past grievances. They decided to attend the wedding, held in the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton. Upon their arrival, the atmosphere transformed. Zahn Hassan, now a celebrated CEO and recent interviewee in Tech Weekly, was recognized instantly. His recent business achievements, including a lucrative deal with Microsoft, turned former critics into fawning admirers. Those same relatives who had dismissed him were now eager to engage, thrusting business cards at him and soliciting investment tips. Joseph handled the sudden attention with grace and kindness, treating everyone with respect, even those who had not extended the same courtesy in the past. Aunt Avery, once a critic of his manners, now praised his brilliance, marveling at his feature in Forbes. Watching this, he couldn't help but reflect on the ironic twists of fate. The once denigrated fortune hunter had built a substantial legacy, dwarfing the Ellie's own wealth, yet he remained humble and gracious. The surprise didn't end there. His parents, now overtly friendly and flattering, approached with a facade of affection, congratulating him on his publicized successes. Their demeanor hinted at ulterior motives, confirmed during the wedding banquet. The true cause of their newfound warmth came to light. Andrew, the chosen successor, had jeopardized Stewart Pharmaceuticals with his reckless decisions, leaving the family desperate for Joseph's goodwill and potential rescue. This revelation painted a clear picture of their priorities, showcasing how quickly fortunes and opinions could change in the face of success and adversity. Their family was now entangled in several lawsuits due to selling counterfeit drugs, and they were under scrutiny by the FDA. My father confided in a hushed tone that banks were avoiding them like the plague and admitted, "We're in deep trouble, sweetheart." The legal expenses were astronomical. My mother, visibly distressed, dabbed at her tears with a napkin. They had mortgaged everything they owned. My father, seeking solidarity, extended his hand across the dinner table to Zay, my husband. Despite our rocky start, he pleaded for financial help, hoping for a few million to manage their crisis, insisting that family helps family. Zay, always empathetic, was nearly ready to write a check, but I held his hand to stop him. Echoing the sentiment, I said coldly, "Family helps family, right?" I reminded them of the time they had disowned me, not once, but twice. My father tried to intimidate me with his stern tone, reminiscent of my childhood. But I was resolute, highlighting the lessons he taught about not handing money to strangers. Ironically, he had become one. As he grew furious, I continued to hold my ground, especially as we celebrated another couple at a wedding reception. I declared that I couldn't associate with those who exploited the sick for profit. My father, outraged and in disbelief at my audacity, accused me of ingratitude. Calmly, I stood and suggested he could disown me a third time if he wished, but it would not change my stance. Hand in hand with Say, we left the venue, my father's angry words trailing us, yet this time, I walked away smiling. That was 1 year ago. Mason, a family friend, occasionally updates me on their status. The once mighty Stewart Pharmaceuticals had collapsed. The home I grew up in was auctioned off. My parents now lived in a modest condo, having sold their extravagant cars and my mother's cherished jewelry to cover their debts. Reflecting on the past, I realized life's strange way of revealing true character. My humble husband, an immigrant, had built a successful empire through sheer diligence and integrity, while my respectable family had lost everything due to their greed and shortcuts. This experience taught me that true wealth isn't measured by money. It's about having people who support and elevate you, who stand by you through thick and thin. By that measure, I consider myself the wealthiest woman alive.